and this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse and started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Do you feel as if you don't belong? Do you know you were meant for something more? Well, you were. Knowledge of who you are and where you really are from is within your reach. Join Janet Carol Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin as they search for the answers as they open up the Stargate to the cosmos.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. And I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker. And today our guest is Mike Beaver. And I'll tell you a little bit about him before I pull him onto the show. He goes by the name Mike. His full name is Charles Michael Beaver, and he's a hypnotherapist. And he's worked with the one abductee who was used as a breeder for one of the gray races. And he assisted another client to remove a dark spirit attachment. But as an information technological professional with over 41 years of computer experience. He's worked with over 60 professional IT-related contracts, which included his clients included CIA, the FBI, Defense Secretary Services, DISA, the Library of Congress, the Treasury Department, NATO, the Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, Microsoft, Shell, Amoco. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. So he's worked with all the world's largest corporations. And he also, I have his long bio on aquarianradio.com, but he worked as a stuntman in the motion picture industry and as a freelance videographer, grip and worker bee for over a decade. And he fell off buildings and did martial arts and took action photographs, directed, ran the video camera, acted on rare occasions. Although he's never said a single word in any movie or PSA. He's an amateur ufologist, a webpage administrator, an unpublished author looking for an agent, and has been an occasional ET contactee since his first encounter on October 3rd, 1980. So I have a much larger bio with incredible information on Mike and some chapters from his upcoming book and some photos on aquarianradio.com. Dr. Lessin, hi. Are you there, sweetheart?
Yes, I am. What I'm asking the listeners to do with Mike, as we do with other experiencers, Mike, we're going to ask you to sort of relate your experiences with extraterrestrials and sort of as they occurred, and for the audience to let yourself imagine you are Mike, that somehow by him telling his story of his experience, you can vicariously remote view from his perspective, but at the same time, if you have some resonance inside you from this life or other, let that be awakened as Mike tells his story. Okay.
Hi, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the invite.
Are you able to speak? Oh, good. There he is.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Well,
tell us a
at the
little
sound.
bit about yourself.
Well, I think you said a lot of it. I've been around the IT world for.
Go ahead, Mike.
Can you hear me okay?
Are you still there?
I can hear you. I can hear you. She probably is doing something that makes her unable to hear you, but go ahead. So we're asking you to put yourself. Oh, she can hear you. Okay.
Okay. So
go ahead.
Anyway, I've been around the IT world since the days of the mainframe, and I started in '74. And you kind of gave a small glimpse of some of my customers. And I don't think anybody wants to hear any of that stuff again. So, I had my first close encounter with an alien craft on October 3rd, 1980. My second encounter was 6 months later on NASA base before the first space shuttle launch. Since then, John Schuessler investigated my two close encounters. And as an amateur ufologist, I've hung out with people like Walt Andrus and Peter Davenport and a few other notable people. I was born in East Texas, lived most of my life in Houston. I've also lived in the Northwest in Oregon and Washington, and also up in the D.C. area when I worked for the FBI and the CIA and others in the government. So anyway, you have different choices of how I go over these stories. I can, if I take it moment by moment on that first encounter, it'll take at least a minimum of an hour to tell that story. But I can give.
Listen, I got it, Mike. Start with the most dramatic incident, the one that'll grip everybody. That'll be the opening scene, and then we can say how you got there and what happened afterwards.
Well, I don't think anything compares to that first sighting. I mean, since then I've had two close encounters with beings one of them was in my apartment and one was at Virginia Tech when I was playing Frisbee one day out in the fields. And I'll tell you what, I'll go through my Frisbee encounter first. That's probably the one that's the easiest to tell because it's the shortest. But
Okay.
it may not be the most dramatic. But I was out playing Frisbee at Virginia Tech where the guy killed all those people, 51 people. I don't know how many people he killed. But anyway, I was just playing Frisbee with a guy, and he was throwing it further than I could catch it, which is unusual. So as soon as he released the Frisbee, I'd turn around and I'd run backwards or behind me as fast as I could to catch the Frisbee. And he was just throwing it just slightly out of my reach. Even when I ran as fast as I could, it would land on the ground. I'd reach down, pick up the Frisbee, and I'd turn around and throw it back to him. And he did this a number of times. And eventually it when I'm running to get the Frisbee, I'm looking around in every direction as far as I can see. And I'm in this field that's humongous. It's a really large field. And so I can see pretty far. And there's nobody coming in my direction. But one time this Frisbee lands and I go to pick it up, and as I grab the Frisbee, I look up, and there's these three ladies laying there on blankets on the grass. And I look at them and I'm like, there's just no way somebody could walk up and sit down anywhere near me without me seeing them ahead of time, because the whole time I'm running for the Frisbee, I'm not really watching the Frisbee. I'm watching everywhere around me as far as my eyes can see to keep me from running over anybody and killing them during the game. So there's no way these ladies just walked up and sat down without me seeing them walk up. And I didn't see them walk up. They were just there, okay? And so he kept throwing it, and it would land near them. After 3 or 4 more throws, he threw in that same spot, and I picked it up, and I looked over, and they were gone. And I looked around as far as I could see, and I could see, very far, because this is, like I said, it's a huge field. And they're nowhere. They're not walking off. They're just gone. And so I stop, and I'm like, where did they go? I didn't know. I didn't see them come up. I didn't see them leave. And so I just kind of blew it off, and I kept throwing the Frisbee with the guy. And after 3 or 4 more throws, it lands, and I pick it up, and they're back. They're back in like 10 foot behind where they originally were. And I'm like, I didn't see them come up the first time. I didn't see them leave. I didn't see them come back. And guess what? A few more throws later, and they're gone again. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, and they're totally gone. They're nowhere. I didn't see them walk off. I don't know how they came up twice on me, and I don't know how they left twice on me. Doesn't sound. That's the end of the encounter. It's like what they did was impossible. They couldn't have walked up without me seeing them. They couldn't have walked off without me seeing them. And they did it twice. They came up without me seeing them twice, and they left without me seeing them twice, which is all that's totally impossible. But they looked like normal people, and there was no way for me to know they were anything other than normal people, except the fact that they got up to me and sat down without me seeing them twice, and got away twice without me seeing them walk off. And this, like I said, there's no buildings near where I was at. There was no place for them to walk off to without me seeing them walk off or walk up. So that's one of the encounters. It's not very dramatic, but it kind of illustrates a point that, like in the Free report, it states that the number one most commonly encountered alien is aliens who look exactly like we do, and that's what they were. People, something that looked exactly like us.
Hey, Mike, I finally got on. I just wanted to say I didn't get to hear all the whole thing. So I heard part of it. You had these humanoid-looking extraterrestrials just come walking up, but you didn't see them walk towards you or exit. I was just reading the President Ronald Reagan's March 1981 briefing at Camp David. And in the briefing, they said that the one alien species, what they consider the dangerous ones, are able to assume any form. So yes, they can look completely normal, like normal humans, and that's what was frightening about them. That's why the CIA chief at the time was very fearful of these extraterrestrials.
Well,
Mike, what did it do for you? What did it do to your consciousness to have that experience? How did that affect you?
Well, it didn't affect me that much. I just, I thought it was rather odd. I didn't even fully consciously accept the fact that they were aliens when I saw them. I just thought about how weird it was that, she said that I said that they walked up. I didn't actually see them walk up. I saw them sitting there on the blankets. I saw them not there, and I saw them sitting on their blankets again. There was no walking involved. They just, one moment we're not there, next moment they're there, next month they're gone, the next month they're there again, the next month they're gone again. And the whole scenario was very bizarre. But, I didn't even fully grok that they were aliens at the time. I was just like, how strange. I was just thinking how strange. I didn't really fully accept the fact. I had to think about it later and realize that they were not human, because of the fact that there's no way they could have walked up and walked away without me seeing them twice.
So let me understand. You just used logic and deduction afterwards to realize they couldn't be just regular humans.
Yes,
it was just reason.
That's the only thing I used. There was just no way for them to, the whole time I'm throwing the Frisbee, I'm not looking at the Frisbee. When I see them launch the Frisbee, I immediately move to sync my body with the speed and direction of the Frisbee. But then instantly, I stop looking at the Frisbee. I start looking around for people to run over, because I might have to jump over people, or, I've had Frisbee typically where I'm literally jumping over people constantly to catch it. And so I want to make sure I don't kill anybody running. So there's no way they could have walked up without me seeing them beforehand twice.
Okay, and the other side of it is the guy that was throwing it. What was your take on that person? Was that a regular person, or what's your take on the thrower? It sounds like what Jim Thorpe could do with a football.
Well, generally people can't throw further than I can run to catch it. That's kind of unusual for me. But, I have no reason to believe he was anything other than what he just, normal guy. But let me give you another one. The other I've only had 2 close encounters that were really close. That was one of them. Another one I had, I was doing a New Age regimen one time, and with this regimen, you took these metaphysically charged stones. They were crystal stones. I don't know if they were crystals or stones. They were kind of crystalline stones or whatever. But you would take one of them and you would tape it to your wrist, and then you would take the other one and stick it in a glass and fill the glass with water. And during the week, you did this regimen for like a week, and you would drink the water with the stone in the bottom of it, the charged stone in the bottom of it. And I did this for like a week, and towards the end of that week, the water, it started tasting really good, and so I started drinking this water like I was at a frat party drinking booze, and so at the end of this process, I stood up and I stuck I'm a martial artist, so I stuck my leg up like I was doing a sidekick. Did you guys ever see the movie Sidekicks or Sidekick?
No, but go ahead.
Okay, well, that movie had Chuck Norris in it, and it had a little boy that I actually worked on this movie. I worked on as a stuntman. I worked on this movie when it was shot in the city of Houston. But anyway, in this one scene in the movie, the boy who played on the TV series that replaced Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the replacement TV series that came on many years later, he was one of the stars in that series. Anyway, in one of the scenes of Sidekicks, him and Chuck stick their legs up in the air like they're doing sidekicks, and they spin a little bit and do another sidekick, and they do this all the way in a circle. and like they're fighting ninjas, and it was a pretend scene. Anyway, I did something like that, except I didn't pull my foot back. I stuck it up in a side kick higher than my head, and I left it out, and I started spinning really fast, like a skater does when they're on the ice rink, really, really fast. And I had total control, and my leg was just stuck out in the air higher than my head, and I was spinning really fast. And I sat my leg down, and when I sat my foot on the carpet, my spirit almost came out of my body. It was very loose, and I started getting tired really quick. But some invisible something came through my wall near my door, and it was invisible, and it made a really strange, almost like a computer cybernetic type of sound. And I couldn't see it, but I could sense its presence. I could tell there was something there, and I could hear it. It was making a really weird sound that I could never make verbally. And as I set my foot down, it's like in the room near the door. And when I set my foot down, it moves across the room fairly quickly from one corner where the door's at to the opposite corner of the room. And at this point, I'm kind of facing where it's at, and I know I'm about to pass out or go out. So instead of passing out, what I do is I kind of kneel down and lay down really quick, and I'm like going down, and my head's just a foot or two away from the couch. And as I almost hit the carpet, my head and shoulders about the only thing that's not touching the carpet at this point. And I'm looking at this thing, which is in the back corner of my apartment. But of course, I can't see it because it's invisible, but I can hear it. And I close my eyes before my head hits the carpet, and I'm still looking actively inside my head. And it's dark with my eyes closed. And it's like on Star Trek where they go into warp and they go through the stars go passing by really quick. So that's what happens to me. It's like I'm shooting through this thing. I'm looking at it with my eyes closed, and I'm like visually like shooting through it, like the stars are coming past my head. And this happens for like 10 or 15 seconds, or less. Maybe it's only 5 seconds or 10 seconds at the most. And then it stops. And I open my eyes, and that's it. That's the end of the story. And those are the only two close encounters I've had with beings. I've never been on a craft, but I've had some notable close encounters. And the first close encounter I had was on October 3rd, 1980, at near the northwest, what at that time was the northwest corner of Houston, Texas, here in the USA. And so anyway, I was living with my mother at the time. I was 18. I'm 56 now. So you figure it's 38 years ago. And I, like I said, I can go through the encounter. I can give you like the 5-minute version, or I can give you the hour version. Which do you prefer?
Well, we only have 2 hours. So, just start and we'll see where it goes. And we may ask you some questions.
Okay.
But go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, I just come back from a party, and I was in a very low state of mind at the time. And I parked my brown Pontiac Le Mans in my mother's driveway. It was sitting up at like a 30-degree angle, and the windows were open. And I was sitting there, and I was extremely depressed. And the only thing I was thinking about was committing suicide. And I was just kind of beyond depression. I was like below that state. I didn't really have the energy to even move. so I'm sitting there, and I don't even have the energy to open the door. I'm just hanging out, trying to decide what to do. I'm thinking about committing suicide, and I'm really not very happy at the time. And so what happened was I saw the object that I'm going to tell you about in my head. It actually appeared in the middle of my head. And all I saw was a black, like a black hole, and 8 equidistant lights spinning on the edge of the black hole. And when I saw it in the middle of my head, it was an actual image. It wasn't a thought. I was actually seeing it with my mind. And so when it came on in my head, it came on just for not even a full second, like a quarter of a second. It came on just long enough for me to see the movement of it spinning. And then it's moving from left to right. And so it disappears, and then it comes back on, and then I see the movement, disappears. It does this like 3 or 4 times, and I consciously recognized the fact that what had just happened, that I saw something, but I didn't consciously realize it was an alien craft at the time. All I know is I saw a ring of lights appear in my head. I don't really snap to what I'm looking at in my head. And so I kind of like, what was that? And then I kind of blow it off. I just kind of like, okay, I don't really come to any conclusion to what it is. I just kind of forget about it.
Have you ever seen any craft that resemble that? Have you ever done a Google search and seen if you could see it or something close to it?
No,
you
ma'am.
might want to try that. Okay. And I had one other question. What were your thoughts? What led you to that depression? What was going on in your life at that time? To that point where all you were thinking about is killing yourself?
Well, I had a death wish for a long time, and it took me more than half my life to figure out what it was. And I guess if you read enough about me or listened to any of my shows, you'll know I have 2 attaching spirits. I have one that sits on my head and one that sits on my back. And I've had them since I was 16 or 18. And I kind of logically figure that's what caused me to be depressed. And
what was going on when you were 16 or 18 that they were able to attach to you?
Well, I got my attaching spirits from smoking pot. I started smoking pot at the age of 16, and I stayed high morning, noon, and night every day of my life for 18 years until I broke the habit. And so breaking the habit, that was an interesting story too. It's fairly short, but anyway, I just stayed high. I stay high all the time, and my wife and I were living in Oregon, and there's a short story, if you want me to tell it to you, where I learned how I got the attachments from smoking pot. I actually learned it from a psychic that I've never met, ever, and I can tell you that story if you want, but it's up to you.
Well, I don't know. I guess, Sasha, you want to hear that story, or do you want to go into the current story? What direction do you want to go?
Oh, the way it goes, Mike, is when you have a segue or an interruption that interrupts the flow, that means it's got bigger energy, and that means it's time to talk about that. So you brought it up. It's logical to me that you would talk about it now.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then my wife and I were living in Oregon, and we somehow I came across this lady who thought she had some healing powers. She had no healing powers. But anyway, so she invited my wife and I down to where they lived in Southern Oregon. We were living in Portland. So my wife and I traveled to Southern Oregon, went to their double-wide mobile home out in the middle of nowhere. And we walked into the mobile home, and they were sitting down, and she looks at me and she points her finger at me, our hand, finger. And she says, "You're healed." And I'm like, I look at her like, well, you don't want to know what I was thinking, but I won't say it. Let's just say I wasn't thinking positive thoughts. And so I knew I wasn't healed at that point. So I also knew that she had no healing powers in that moment. So so we hung out, and we were polite to the couple. And after being there for a little while, we left and went back to Portland. And 2, 3, 6 weeks later, she calls me, and she says, "I talked to my psychic friend about your problem, and she said, and my psychic friend said that you got your attachments from smoking, but I didn't see you smoke. So do you smoke?" She asked me on the phone, "Do I smoke?" And I said, because her friend never told her smoking what. She left the last word off. And I said, "Yeah, I used to smoke, but it wasn't cigarettes. I've never smoked cigarettes. I smoked pot." And I explained to her that I stayed high morning, noon, and night for 18 years, from the age of 16 till 34 years of age. And so she realized at that moment that we both realized at that moment that I got my attaching spirits from smoking pot. And so that's how I came to understand that I got my attaching spirits from smoking pot. So anyway, we've kind of made a full circle. We're back to what should we talk next? So I can go back to the first close encounter, or we can continue on with
I would like to just say it's wonderful to have a part of oneself that can use substances or behaviors to alleviate one's anxiety. And so it's rather than just give up a habit. What's really interesting to me is what's underneath the habit. What motivates you to reach for that cigarette? But now that you're a mature, reflective person, you don't need it anymore.
Well, let me tell you the story of how I kicked the habit, because that's an interesting story also. I was laying on my bed one day in Houston, Texas, and this was at the age of 34, the year before I met my wife at the age of 35. And I was unemployed at the time, and all the lights were off in the apartment. Or actually, I'm getting two stories mixed up. Anyway, I was laying there, and a spirit came upon me. It covered my body. I could feel it, and I sensed that it was a positive spirit, though I don't know how I knew it, but somehow I knew it was a positive spirit. And I could feel pain in my throat, and what I heard was, it was like I was talking to myself. It said to me, "My first commandment to you is to stop smoking." And as it was saying this, I didn't hear any voices. It was just like I was talking to myself. And I could feel a pain in my throat. And I realized that the spirit was letting me know that the damage I was doing to my body from smoking the pot. And so from that moment to this present moment, I've never touched pot. So that's how I kicked the habit. And you can kick it without doing the 12-step program, as long as you do the last step, which is connecting with the larger picture. And so that's that last step, the 12th step, I believe, is the connecting with everything. So anyway, where would you go ahead?
That's a really great technique. You can rise above any kind of inner voice that drives you by connecting with a higher spirit. That's totally right on. I can dig it. Yes.
So, which direction would you like me to go now?
Okay, so before we went back to your previous, so let's go back to where we were, where you were telling about your incident in 1980.
Okay.
Is that where we were? I lost track. I think
Wait. There's one more thing from what you said. Now, as I can see, everything changed for you when you met your wife. Your life turned around and got better. Is that what happened?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. She's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, but I wouldn't say my life turned around for the better. I've had lots of my roller coaster just sped up. It's like the ride just got faster, and the dips got faster and harder, and it got actually more scary. The going forward is more scary than what was behind. So I wouldn't say it necessarily got better. I'd say it got more thrilling.
Wow, what happened?
Okay, proceed. We're all on the edge of our chairs. Go ahead.
Well, I've had all kinds of things happen. I mean, I've had I was mind fucked. Excuse my French. I know I'm not supposed to say that. In a jail for 5 days in Manassas, Virginia, and that was kind of scary. And I went through 3 ayahuasca experiences in the Amazon jungle. That was kind of scary. And there's all kinds of, I've had lots of experiences. I mean, I could just go through a bunch of them, and it just all depends on which direction you want me to go.
We want you to go where you're going, and we're tracking you. So what's the most relevant things that you want our listeners to know about your life's journey and how it affected you and how it can impact the world and help the world?
Well,
wait, I got to tell you, what I got plugged into, wanted to hear about is your companions, your positive guides, the ones that are helpful to you.
Well,
yeah, you had someone tell you to quit smoking, and that seemed to help you. What else were they? But anyway, go where you want to go. We're going to stop by interjecting. Go ahead. We're just tracking you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I tell you what. Let me do one thing here. Let me pull up my book, and I'm going to look at the index because, I'd like to go through this chronologically because otherwise it's going to be very confusing. But
yeah, your
book
idea. Has a lot of fascinating chapters. So go ahead.
Yeah,
that's a great idea. Go for it.
Grab it.
Okay, so hold on just 1 second here. I'm going to pull up the index to my book. So a long time ago, I met these people. I was 18, and I met this guy. To this day, he believes he's Jesus Christ. And we would get high, smoking pot, and we played chess. And he showed me about chi and the subtle energy. And his buddy, who ended up hanging himself from a tree, killing himself, he also thought this guy was Christ, which is really odd because usually people think they're Christ, but nobody else does. But his best friend also thought he was Christ. So anyway, his best friend, Paul, he told me to hold my hands out like you're holding a melon, with your fingers very close to the other, very relaxed and very close to each other, but you're holding like a huge baseball or a small melon. And I could feel the chi flowing, the tingling on the tips of my fingers when, because I'd never experienced chi before that point. And I'd never seen anybody teach that method until, 20 or 30 years later. I watched somebody on TV or actually it was probably on YouTube video. I saw somebody teaching the same method of learning about chi. And so, but I'd never seen it up until that point. But anyway, after that, I had all kinds of things happen to me. I was playing around with the energy for a while there, and I was exploring various things, the New Age movement, and I went through. Are y'all familiar with Max, the Crystal Skull?
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Familiar, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I went through a ceremony with Max, and there was like 20 or 30 people in that ceremony. And the two ladies, there were like 3 or 4 ladies involved with the ceremony who their eyes rolled up into the top of their head. They had their eyes open, and that's one of the symptoms of possession. And so they had some Indian spirits possessing their bodies, and they were doing the Indian songs and that you typically hear of an American Indian. And that was an interesting experience. But I got to think about this for a second. Exactly. I didn't really plan on telling you my whole life story, every bit of it. So, I didn't have all this planned out. So let me think about this for a second here.
Sure.
I was into Eckankar for a while. Y'all are familiar with Eckankar, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, so I was into that for a while. But I had, as a hypnotherapist, I had a session. I had a practice open for about a year, and I had quite a few clients. And one of those clients was, as you said in my bio, she was used as a breeder for the Greys. Now, she had 72 encounters when I knew her, 24 implantations, 24 checkups, and 24 removals. And she had 55 offspring, and they chose her because she was extremely psychic. She could get out of her body before she was born. When she was in the womb and her parents were sleeping in the bed next to each other, she'd be like out of her body, hovering above their bed, watching them while her body's in the womb. So she was able to get out of her body before she was even born. And she kept that talent all the way to the present. And that's one of the reasons why they took her, because she had a lot of psi talent. And so when they would take her, she would be strapped or Velcroed down to a table, and she'd be getting out of her body, moving around the ship, checking them out, and she would like jump inside their head and make them move their head a certain way and look at like the genitals of the other alien or lack of genitals. And she learned quite a bit about them. She said they're like the alien race, the gray race that was abducting her and probably still is had no nerve endings. It was like a shark. And so when she would see them on the craft, typically they'd be in a room. There's 3 aliens on the craft and nobody else, right? That's all. She said that's all it took to fly the craft. And she said they don't even need spacecraft. They could travel the universe without spacecraft. But the only reason they have the spacecraft is to tie you down on a table and to carry the instruments to do the breeding process with, and to carry their food and for various things like that. But if they just wanted to come here, they didn't need a craft. They could just move, dematerialize in one spot and materialize in another spot. They're that advanced, at least the race that was taking her. So that was one of my clients. Now, another client I had, do y'all know who Shakuntala Modi is?
No, never heard of that. Yes.
Okay, she is an attachment removal hypnotherapist. She was a psychologist, or actually she was a psychiatrist for many years, and then she discovered hypnotherapy, and then she started doing straight hypnotherapy, and she wrote a book called Remarkable Healings, and it's about removing attaching spirits. And basically what her book is a series of conversations that she had with demons that were attached to people. And by the way, my 2 attachments are demonic. So anyway, this client that came to me wanted me to use her technique on him. So he bought one of her books for himself, and then he bought an extra one for me, and he brought it to me, and he told me read it, or I think he might have mailed it to me, and told me to read it, And when I got to reading it, we would have a session. Well, I got about a quarter of the way through the book, and he couldn't wait. See, what happened to him was he liked manifesting, like witches do. And so he had read a book. He told me that he read a book that he said everybody who wrote this book committed suicide. And he would never tell me the name of the book because he didn't want me to read it. But he said once he read that book that he couldn't get out of a bad frame of mind. And that's why he found my card stuck to a clipboard on a wall somewhere. I went around tacking them up on walls in various places and shopping centers and stuff. And he found my card. And he sent me the book. I read about a quarter of a book. He couldn't wait, so we had a session. And I didn't really know her technique at the time. And so I just used normal techniques. And it was very dark in the apartment at the time. And so I couldn't see him very well. And nothing much happened in the first session. But after the session ended, he came out of trance. And he told me that the left side of his face was doing all kinds of contortions during the session. But, of course, I couldn't see it because I was sitting on his right side, and it was fairly dark anyway. And so he came back to me for a second session. He paid me, and he left, and he came back for a second session. And in his mind's eye, he saw some type of energy, a blob. That was his attaching spirit. He could see it in his mind's eye while he was in trance. And he said this Venus? He said a Venus flytrap ate the blob, and then it disappeared. And that was the whole session as far as what the part about getting rid of it. That was the whole thing. And he said we thought it worked, and so he left. And then I never saw him after that, but he called me or emailed me. I don't know if I called him or he called me, but we kept in touch after that. And he said that he used her technique on many people, and it worked. And it worked for him too. The session we had worked completely, and he said at some point he started laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing for like a week. And but it worked for him, and that's that whole story. But anyway, I have had so many different things happen over the years. I guess the next thing that's of any note that I should probably tell. Go ahead.
Well, I just find it's really useful in normal existential kind of psychology that I do. It's like we say that any human need that's thwarted and suppressed becomes demonic or overblown unless it has its needs are met and integrated into the whole thing. So that in a way, it's our own demonics are what make us receptive to external. As without, so within.
Well, the way I look at it, if you smoke pot, if you smoke cigarettes, if you drink alcohol as an addiction, if you do illegal drugs, and also a lot of legal drugs, my belief is that all 5 of these and many other things break down your auric barrier around your body, kind of turning it into Swiss cheese, and that allows attaching spirits to attach to you. That's my belief.
Well, there was a book called Conversations Beyond the Light or something like that, where this organization was looking at they were connecting with people that had already died, and so they what was that called, honey? It was a book you have there. Anyway, so some people, part of their group, they had died, and so they had set up those arrays, and they were talking across the veil. And what they said in the book was that's something to that similar, that people who use, but it's certain types of drugs. It's not everything. There are some things that are sacred and positive and some things that are negative. And it also depends on the individual. You can always protect yourself and not open yourself to attachments. But something happens that some people have attachments. It's not 100% across the board. Not everybody that does smokes anything or does anything, we have attachments. But there's a tendency for you're opening your aura, opening your chakra, opening yourself to possession, especially when you do the really hard things like heroin and, the really hard drugs. They open yourself to attachments. But there's plenty of ways of getting rid of them once you have them. Did you get rid of your attachments, or are they still there?
They're still there.
Okay. Do you want to get rid of them?
Well, I have a dream, and I should probably tell you about it. It takes a while to tell you the dream because it's kind of a long process. But a long time ago, I had a girl. I was at a gathering, and this girl, we were having some kind of break. I don't remember what it was, but she started walking in front of me. And she stopped and looked at me, and she said, "You keep your problem because you believe that one day having that problem will help other people remove their problems, right?" And she said it as a statement and a question both. And I looked at her and I gave her a big smile and I said, "Oh, you're very sharp." And she looked at me and goes, "What?" She said, "What arrogance." So
you are arrogant. That's cute.
Yeah. So anyway, let me tell you about my arrogance. So here's the way it works. One day, I'm hoping to be sitting in a chair in front of an audience, and the audience is sitting in their chairs looking at me. And I could be up on a stage, or I could be not up on a stage. It really doesn't matter. But there's a line of people on one side of the theater or the whatever room I'm in, and they're snaking up around me and coming up to where they're next to me, near me. And there's a guy at the head of the line, and he's got a watch. And he allows people to go beyond the end of the line to right behind me. And the people he allows to go one at a time beyond the end of the line step up behind me, and they stick their arm out to the left, their left arm out to the left side of my head. And I reach up and I grab their hand, and they have to have their eyes, they close their eyes and then relax their arm. And they allow me to move their whole arm with my hand, and I stick their hand on the top of my head where my attaching spirit is sitting. And I have done this with my wife, and she could feel my attaching spirit. She could feel its vibration, and she said it was the strangest thing she'd ever felt in her life. And I doubt that that's exactly true, but I do have a feeling she actually could feel it. So if that's true, that means they can feel it too. So when I stick their hand on my head, this is all going to be videotaped, or video recorded, I should say, since there's no more tape, and people will see if they feel it, they will probably react visually in their face, and this will all be captured on video, and then as many brave souls who want to see if they can feel a demon on my head will get the chance to do so, and this will all be recorded. And then after it's all done and everybody sits down, I will stand up and I will look at everybody and say, how many people who came up and touched the top of my head, how many of you felt anything below your hand? And all those people who felt something will raise their hand. And this will all be captured on YouTube or on TV or wherever it's being captured. It'll get posted on YouTube. And at some point, I'm hoping that the human race will realize, without any doubt whatsoever, at least, they'll still have lots of doubt, but at least in some fashion, they'll realize that attaching spirits are real, not just a possibility or a maybe, but they're actually real. And then after that, the other two major steps are we have two contests. One contest is for somebody who can invent a technology that will see attaching spirits. And we've gotten close to that already. Are you familiar with the how the Zero Lux camera can see spirits in real time? Do you understand that?
No, tell us about it.
Okay, so I was at a ghost hunting convention in Skycomish, Washington. It's a ghost town. When I say it's a ghost town, I mean it's literally a ghost town. And the municipality is, the whole town is black, right? So there's no power in the town, but there's a hotel. And so I went on this ghost hunting trip. We all came to this hotel. The hotel has power. And to this day, I still don't know how this hotel gets power, because there's no power anywhere else in the town. There's no street lights. It's totally dark. The whole town is absolutely dark. Okay. But somehow this one hotel gets power from somewhere. I don't know where. But anyway, so we all came to this hotel for this ghost meetup.
We'll be back in a few minutes. Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitor's peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. Why am I here? You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here. You haven't answered my question. The Matrix is older than you know, as you are undoubtedly gathering. The anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation. Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lessin.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Collision Course is back. Schedule B on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos, and I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and our producer, Thomas Becker. And this is Revolution.Radio, and our guest is Mike Beaver. Before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that. What?
You want me to pick up where I left off, Janet?
No, hold on.
Okay.
You went mute, Janet.
Okay, here. Okay, sorry. I didn't know. Okay, so Janet Care Lessin, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, Stargate to Cosmo. We're back. Producer Thomas Becker, and our guest is Mike Beaver. So before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go to that donation button on revolution.radio and make your donation. And we really appreciate your donation. Pardon?
You're going in and out.
Sasha, can you check it? I'll log back on. I'll go out and back in. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Okie dokie. So, Mike, I was really interested in your ayahuasca trips. What was that like for you?
Hell.
Say some more.
Okay, so first of all, I went to Iquitos, Peru, which is the largest city in the Amazon rainforest in any country. So it was out in the jungle, 5 or 6 miles outside of Iquitos, and I had 3 sessions, and well, it's kind of hard to remember all of it because it's kind of all blends together. But there were, like the first session, my body just relaxed, all the energy. It felt like, you know, how you normally hold tension in your body. You cross your legs, or you hold tension in some fashion. Maybe you hold your arms across your chest. You do all these things to hold tension in your body. Well, all that let go in that first session, so I thought it was a kind of a positive thing. But I didn't realize that how the second session was going to go. And that one kind of scared the crap out of me. And so it kind of scared me so much that I left. I left that compound I was in, and because it just scared me so much. But when I went back to town, I still had a part of me that still wanted to. I went there for tax purposes first. I wanted, you have to be outside the country for so many days to get tax breaks. So the main reason I went overseas was to get a tax break because I wasn't outside the country long enough to get the break. And so that's why I went over there the first reason. But then when I had the session and everything, I still had to be out of the country for so long. And so I stayed there, and I had a desire to have another session. I don't know why. It scared me so much. I should have just let it go, but I didn't. Some part of me wanted to still. It wasn't just that I wanted to have an ayahuasca experience. It was I wanted the third reason I went. First reason, get the tax cut. The second reason was drink the ayahuasca. The third reason was to get my attaching spirits removed. I really went there for an exorcism, but and I found out there was a shaman in Iquitos that could take care of moving attaching spirits, but I never got a chance to meet the guy. So,
but what scared you so much, Mike? What was so frightening?
Well, basically ayahuasca, people talk about it like you see things, but actually most people don't see anything. It's an energetic change in your body. Your energy changes, and it's kind of hard to put it in words that would make any dent over the radio. It's just not something you would translate into a verbal something in words, because it's like in your mind you're in hell itself, if you read the accounts, ayahuasca accounts that are posted on the internet, and watch the videos about ayahuasca, the most common experience among all of them is an experience of hell itself. But it's not a visual experience. It's an energetic experience. You feel like you're there in hell, but it's not something you see. It's something you experience in another way, and it's just not something I can translate into words. But let me give you one of the things that happened. Okay, so there was another fellow in the in one of those sessions that he started saying "ow, ow, ow, ow," really loud, like he was hurt, like he was in pain. And then he, at some point right after that, he started speaking in an extremely low, deep voice that was too low. And he started saying things that a human would not say. He started saying things that a demon would say. And I got the notion he was possessed. And in my head, my attaching spirit was telling me, if that demon completes its mission, everybody in that room is dead. So I was just hoping that, I was praying that like I've never prayed in my life, and that I would get out of there alive. And so, my attaching spirit, I guess it was during the last session, it sort of was taking me over. The one that sits on my head was basically taking over my body. And there was a point where I got up and I walked. I had to take a dump, and the toilet was outside the building I was in. It was over the river, and you had to go outside the back of the building into the down this walkway, or down this just 5 or 6 foot outside the room. And then there was, you opened a door and you went into the restroom, and you sat down and you did your business. And so I started heading to that restroom to use the restroom. I defecated in my pants because I never made it to the restroom. But as I was walking, I blacked out. And when I say I blacked out, I don't mean I passed out and fell down. I mean, my world ended in my head. I was no longer there. And my attaching spirit was totally in control of me at that point. And so, going in and out of consciousness as I'm walking, I knew that was not very good for me, and that I might not make it beyond that session. That might be the end of it for me. That my attaching spirit might take full control of my body, and they might find me in a river somewhere. That river that we were right next to, because that building was right next to a river. And so, and then after the session ended, I kind of bleed 3 different sessions together. So when I'm talking about this, I don't really remember whether it's the second session or the third session. But there was actually a close encounter we had while we were there, and I should probably tell you that because it's an interesting story. So one night we were not doing the ayahuasca, and we were standing outside the largest building in the compound. This was in the last session, the third session I had. It was on that second compound. I left the first compound, went back to town, and then made some more connections and went to a second compound and did the ayahuasca a third time. Another mistake. And so anyway, there was one night when I was on that second compound, and we're standing outside this building, behind the building, and everybody's looking up at the sky or looking around, just talking and stuff. And one of the other people in the crowd looks up at the sky and sees this craft sitting above the jungle. And the craft was about a quarter the size of your thumbnail or smaller. And it was very small, but it was much bigger than a star. And it was like 10 times the size of a star. And it was just a little gray nothing. And you could barely see it, but it was you could see it, but you had to look really closely to see it at all, to even know it was there. And I'm not sure how somebody spotted it, but they did. One of the other people looked up, they saw it, and then I looked and I could see it, and everybody could see it, right? And so one of the guys went inside, he got his binoculars, or he got a set of binoculars, they were not his, but he grabbed this set of binoculars that were sitting inside this building and brought them outside, and he couldn't look through the binoculars because he had glasses. So I looked through the binoculars, and everybody else looked through the binoculars except for one lady, who was the lady who brought this kid that went and got the binoculars. She never got up off her rear. She was leaning against the building, the thatched hut building, and she never got up off her rear and looked through the binoculars. She didn't care about this craft sitting up there, and I thought that was really odd. But anyway, so I looked through the binoculars, and when I looked at it through the binoculars, it was like an amoeba. It was a very odd shape. It was black, and it was darker than the black sky itself around it, which is very odd because I don't see how that's even possible. But I couldn't see the edge of the craft. I couldn't see where the craft stopped and the night sky began. But without the binoculars, it looked gray. With the binoculars, it looked black. But you could see, it had like 20 or 30 lights on it, and they were going off and on individually. And I tried to count them, but I couldn't count them because they kept going on and off, and it kept messing up my count. And so it sat there in the same position for the rest of the night. And the sky, I don't know if you know how stars work, but they rotate across the sky while the Earth is stationary. The stars are rotating around the Earth. So it stayed stationary in that same position with the stars as the stars, for like 2 hours. And I stood there and watched it. And while everybody else went to bed, I stayed out there and watched this thing with and without the binoculars for like 2 hours. And it slowly drifted across the sky with the stars until it got behind the trees and even within the trees I could still see it, but at some point it got to where I couldn't see it at all. But I had to like run around the other side of the house and try to see it because I couldn't see it on the one side as it was drifting with the stars, but it stayed exactly stationary with the stars. So the next day was, I think, the next to the last day I was there. And I sat outside the back of this hut in a chair with one of the owners of the compound and his wife and his kid. The four of us sat there and we were talking, and I'm talking to him in English. He's translating to her in Spanish. And so I'm telling him about what I just told you, and he's translating that to her in Spanish. And she's replying to him in Spanish, and he's translating what she says to me in English. And she said to him, and he translated it to me, that the assistant to one of the cooks saw a circular craft the same night as we all saw that craft. And one of the cook's assistants saw a disc craft on the same night. And so that's another encounter, which I forgot to tell you. But from here, you still want me to, I'm trying to think of where to go from here. Basically, ayahuasca scared me because it's basically allowed one of my attaching spirits to almost take me over. That's why it scared me. That's the answer to your question.
Oh, sure. I've witnessed many ayahuasca journeys, and one of the most interesting ones that I noticed is every person stated their intention, what they wanted to experience before they ingested the yahe, the ayahuasca. This one fellow who had been in the seminary said he wanted to experience all the pain that Jesus experienced when he had to carry the cross down the street. And my wife at the time said, I would like to experience everything that I avoided experiencing in this and other lives. And I said, I want to stay in my consciousness and see what's going on with all these other people and study myself and them, but I don't want to throw up or poop in my pants. Okay, and so then I watched everybody get exactly what they wanted. This poor fellow suffering on the cross like Jesus, but I didn't throw up or anything. And in the morning I was showing off and I stood on my head, but then I threw up. But anyway, everybody gets what they seek. That's their intention.
Well, I went through for an exorcism, and the one of the two people that worked with me, at some point, most of the people were through with their sessions. They'd kind of finished everything, and I was just getting started, and I hadn't really started hurling all the stuff out of my stomach yet. And I was just beginning that process, and everybody else was already finished. And so he tried to get everybody to leave, and I told him, no, I would prefer everybody watch to see how the session goes, because he was going to give me a private session to get rid of my attaching spirits. And but needless to say, he didn't succeed. But anyway, I guess that answers your question as far as why it scared me. But
oh boy, yeah, I got it, definitely.
Anyway, I can go back I can either go back to the second encounter, I can go back to the first encounter, I can go to...
I want you to sort of look at this analytically and say, is your encounters with these demonics, if you had scripted them for your own growth and development and evolution, what would that be about? If you were the author of the whole situation, what would you learn? What's the point of all this in terms of your evolution, Mike?
Well, I was telling you about my dream of the future. And that is really the answer to your question. The first part of the dream is the people of this world, they see that somebody has attaching spirits, that the people of Earth come to realize at some point through me by touching the top of my head and feeling the energy there, they realize that these attaching spirits are real. And if they realize that, then at some point we have this contest, or where somebody like a couple of angels or crowdsourced, we get together, $1 to $10 million, and say if somebody comes up. Remember, that's the reason why I started telling you about the story of the Zerolux camera, the ghost story, where we left off at the end of the before the commercial. See, let me go back to that one, because that kind of explains part of it. So, I'm in Skycomish, Washington, right? We're walking around the street at night, and it's pitch dark, and I have a flashlight, but even with the flashlight, you're like stumbling into ditches and stuff, and it's really hard to see because your flashlight can only see so far, and there's no street lights. I had this girl let me use her third generation night vision goggles for an hour or two, and that was pretty cool. But anyway, at some point, the girl I was following around, she was a paranormal and UFO investigator, and she had a brand new Sony Zero Lux camera, and it had just come on the market like 5 or 6 days before. She bought it and had it with her, and at some point I was standing behind her, and this orb, you can call it a ghost or you can call it an orb. I prefer to call it a ghost or an orb, and it came over. These ladies were looking around, and they were seeing the orbs. They were the ladies I was with. A lot of them were psychic. I'm not that psychic. I can be very psychic, but I'm not as psychic as they were. So they're like pointing at the sky and goes, "There's one, and there's one." They're pointing all over the place, and I can't see anything, right? And so I'm standing behind this girl, and she's got this Sony Zero Lux camera, and she's got the little thing on the side of it popped out, and I can see how the video is what it's recording in real time. And so this orb comes over our heads, which I cannot see, comes down in front of us, and it gets in front of the camera, and it starts flying, and I'm watching this in real time, right, as it's being recorded. It starts flying in a figure-8 formation, and it's like showing off in front of the camera. A bug would never fly in a infinity sign symbol formation. The bugs just don't do that. And so I knew, watching it fly in an infinity sign, that it was not just a bug. Not to mention it was bigger than a bug. So anyway, after that session, after that ghost hunt ended, 2 or 3 weeks later, a month or so later, this girl sent me a VHS copy of this recording that she recorded on this Sony Zero Lux camera, right? It's night vision. Zero Lux is night vision, right? It's infrared, right? So she sends me this VHS tape, and I'm working at Microsoft at the time, and we're up there talking, and I'm talking about ghosts and this and that. All these guys I'm with are skeptics, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to prove this. So I go home and I get this VHS recording, which I've looked at, half a dozen times, and seen this ghost do this figure-8 formation on it, and you see orbs flying past the screen over and over, and I take it up to Microsoft and we stick it in the player, and we play it, and you got this big flat screen TV back when they were really expensive, and we're sitting there watching, and these orbs go flying past on the video, and they're going like, "Oh, those are just bugs," and I'm waiting for this area where the ghost is flying in a figure-8 formation, right? I'm waiting for that to come on the video, on the tape. And to this day, it's no longer on that tape. It disappeared off the tape, and so the tape was never edited, but that part of the tape is that piece of the tape, somehow that figure-8 event is no longer on that tape. I don't have the tape anymore, but I watched it at Microsoft. I fast forwarded through it over and over, backwards and forward, looking for that point on the tape, and it disappeared. It was no longer on the tape. So I had nothing to show those guys, but that was kind of weird. But anyway, so back to the ghost hunt. So anyway, if you understand that the Zero Lux camera can see a video, a ghost or an orb, a spirit in real time, then forward to my dream, we have a contest where we put in the kitty $1 million or $10 million or whatever it takes, and somebody has to take the technology one step further. Instead of just seeing orbs flying around in the sky, you should be able to take the technology that exists and take it another step forward and see attaching spirits attached to humans in real time. So that's a part of my dream. And then the third part of my dream is where we have a similar contest, put in the kitty $1 million or $10 million or whatever it takes, and somebody who knows a technique to remove attaching spirits that anybody can learn and that it works every time, for sure, they come forward. And if a person has such a technique, then they win the money. But they have to teach it to like a dozen people who have no clue how to do exorcisms. And if those dozen people who we pick out of a crowd at random and can reliably remove attaching spirits, provably, because we've already got the technology, you see, to see them in real time at this point, then at that point, we can start removing every attaching spirit on every person on the entire planet.
Oh, so, listen, Mike, I got to tell you, I studied with a dude named Bill Baldwin. He's passed over now, but he's trained people how to do this. He's got a method that really works, and he's got a book that's published. It's called.
I've read all of his books.
So, they're so cool.
All of them.
They really help. They're really good.
I have his book that tells you how to. The book that's for other hypnotherapists.
Great.
I've got that sitting in my car. It's always in my car. I keep it with me at all times so that I have something to read. Can't hear me?
Yeah. No. Yeah. You were fading out. Just talk to your mic.
Yeah.
So you've read Baldwin's stuff. Oh, he was such a good teacher. We all learned a lot. He demonstrated everything, and we got to try it out on each other.
Well, if a person can teach a technique that works every time for demons, and this has got to it's got to work for all spirits, and the average person has to be able to use it, and it has to be easy to teach. There's all these catches. It has to be easy to teach, easy to learn, works every time, and is provable. And then if you have the technology to see the demons, or not just demons, but humans too. A lot of attaching spirits are not demons; they're humans. Are you familiar with George Ritchie's book?
You're fading out again. You're fading out again?
Can you hear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you. I can't hear him, honey.
I don't know why.
Well,
we're having troubles today.
But but I'm certainly familiar with all kinds of attachments.
Have you read George Ritchie's book, Return from Tomorrow?
Oh no! Tell me about it.
Okay, so in his book, he has a Christ or a Christ-like spirit come to him, and it takes him on a journey like. Remember the journey, Scrooge?
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, he has a similar journey. He's taken to the past, the present, and the future. And in one of those journeys, he's in a bar. And in the bar, he can see that everybody drinking has humans attached to the back of their heads. And in the way it's told in the book, the humans that are attached to the back of the people drinking at the bar, they're attached at the cowlick part of the head, where the back of the head meets the top of the head. And that's where my attaching spirit can be found sitting most of the time. So that's an accurate depiction of how spirits attach to humans. It's at the top back of the head. And so, anyway, the reason why they attached to the humans was they were just humans that died and were drinkers, and they wanted to keep drinking after they were dead, and so they attached to other humans. And a human would pass out from drinking, and they would jump into the body while they were passed out. So that's what he saw in that, and that's what he relates in the book. But I have another question for you. Are you familiar with Dr. Carl Wicklund?
Are you, Janet?
No, never heard.
Okay, so
all these people we haven't heard of, but go ahead.
Okay, well, Dr. Carl Wicklund he wrote a book like Shakuntala Modi's book, Remarkable Healings. He's sort of on the other end of the spectrum. Shakuntala Modi's book is all demons. Okay, but his book, he's got two books. One's called 30 Years Among the Dead, and the other one's called The Gateway of Understanding. And you can find links to them, both those books, free copies on my website under the Demons page. Okay, so if you scroll down the left side of my page, there's over 100 words, and you scroll down to the D's and click on Demons, and then that page, my page is profoundstates.com, and then go to the word Demons on the left, and you click on that, and then on the Demons page, there's a section called Featured Books, and then you've got links to mostly free copies of these books, 30 Years Among the Dead and The Gateway of Understanding are his two books. So,
thank you. You're putting them out there. That's free. That's wonderful.
So anyway, he was another psychiatrist, and he what he would do is he used a Wimshurst device, which is a static electricity device. It basically collects hundreds of thousands of volts of electricity. And if you touch it the wrong way, it will kill you. But anyway, it's sort of like Tesla's coil, where it's very extremely high voltage, like 1 million volts, but it's very low amperage. And so when you would touch the two leads to the person, they wouldn't feel it at all. But the attaching spirits inside them would feel it like it's fire. And it would cause the attaching spirits inside his clients. He ran a mental, an insane asylum. And his clients, his clients were locked up in the institution. And so he would have their relatives come, and he would have this session, and he would use the Wimshurst device, and he would crank the device, and he would collect all this hundreds of thousands of volts of electricity, and then he would touch it to the client, two leads to the client, and the spirits inside them would feel the electricity like it was fire, and they would jump out of the person, and they would jump into his wife. His wife was in a trance. His wife was a medium, and he would put her into a trance like a hypnotherapist would, and she would be laying on a couch on the other side of the room, and the spirit would jump out of the person because he would touch him with the leads of the touching the client from the Wimshurst device. They would jump out of the client and into his wife, and they would start talking through his wife, and the relatives would ask the spirits questions like, why did you come here? Why did you get into my wife? Why did you get into my sister, my daughter, so forth? And they would ask them all these questions. And then helper spirits would take the attaching spirits, and they would take them on into the light. And so that's, but in these two books, the point I wanted to get to with this conversation is, in his two books, the word demon does not appear in either one of them. So he went 30 years working on people, removing their attaching spirits, and he never came across a demon the whole time. And there are other people who've I've read many books on this topic, and I've come across other people who would do remote removal of attaching spirits with pendulums and other methods, and they would never come across a demon their whole life. They said the same thing.
What,
Mike? Mike, you know, when we were doing a lot of these, when we finally found out, why did you possess this person? Why have you attached to this person? And it's not a person that has an addiction or anything. And the answer is usually, I'm here to dim this person's light. Their potential for love and light and kindness is too great. I'm here to mess that up.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I think the reasons for attaching are as unique as the spirits that do the attaching.
I have a question. What is your definition of a demon? What makes an entity a demon as opposed to something else?
Okay, so that's a couple different stories that I should tell you that I am forgetting lots of stories to tell you. But
that's okay.
Here's two. Okay, so I used to go to this girl's house when I was in Portland, Oregon, and we used to try to get out of our bodies. And we would listen to Robert Monroe's hemispheric synchronization tapes that were designed to help you get out of your body. And so I never succeeded in getting out of my body using his tapes. I did get halfway out of my body one time. It scared the you know what out of me. But that's a different story. Anyway, I would go over to her house and we would listen to these tapes and attempt to get out of our body. And one time I was over there and I was sitting across the card table from her. She looked at me and she said, "You know, you have a small imp jumping around on the top of your head." And she called it an imp, IMP. And at the time, it was jumping around on the top of my head. I could feel it. You know, it never did that before or since, but at that moment, it was jumping around the top of my head. And so I knew that she could actually see it, that it wasn't, that she wasn't just making it up. And I had already known about my attaching spirit sitting on the top of my head before she mentioned it. But an imp is just another description of a demon. But in any case, there was another occasion, also in Oregon. I was in a jail. I was in the Justice Center in downtown Oregon. And I was sitting in the jail cell on the floor, and I was doing a form of yoga. And I was bowing and doing the side-to-side motion, and I was moving my consciousness through various points of my body to get the chi moving through my body and doing yoga. And when I finished doing the yoga, the cellmate, the guy that was in the cell with me, Jason, he was sitting on the bottom bunk, and he looked over at me as I finished, and he said, "You know you have a demon sticking its tail in your back, don't you?" And he said it as a statement and a question. And I moved my awareness to my back, and I could feel the sharp pain that I'd had for many years off and on. And I could feel the energy around the sharp pain. And I knew that in that moment that he was describing what was on my back correctly. And I had to admit that I did have a demon sitting on my back in that moment, but I didn't realize the one that was on my back was there until he said that. So that's how I know they're demons.
You know, in the Baldwin system, when we ask demons, for who sent you here? For whom do you work? They wind up saying, the devil, the big one, and you have to cast a net around the whole network of demons that might infect your everyone you know and your relatives, and cast them all away and get them out of your whole network. And that's so a demon is an in-between, an intermediate. It's usually working part of a network, and for a other force that says it'll disappear. But if you get a demon to look inside, it'll see that it too is of the light, and then you can send it to its place in the light after it tells you what its mission is with you and why it's attached to you.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his technique of having the spirit focus on a point of light within it that is its true nature, and if you can get it to focus on that, consistently, that light will grow until it turns back into its true nature. And yeah, I'm familiar with Baldwin's technique.
Oh, it's so good. I love it.
But anyway, so you want me to finish with my first close encounter, or go to my second one?
Yeah, go ahead, and then I have a question. But go ahead.
Go ahead and ask your question first.
Okay, hold on. I wanted to ask you about your book. It's called Instruments of Control: How Attaching Spirits Cause War, Terrorism, Crime, Racism, Murder, Insanity, Mental Illness, Molestation, Marital Discord, Suicide, and many other illnesses, and are leading humanity to its fourth impending fall. Woo!
It's a nice, interesting title. Huh?
That is a very interesting title. And we have about, not 15 minutes, about 10 minutes, I guess, 11 minutes. And so I had wanted to know more about this, what's behind this title. It's an amazing title.
Okay, so click, first of all, the first thing you want to do is on my website, up in the right-hand corner of profoundstates.com, you'll see a link. It's the only link in the far upper right-hand corner of the page. If you click on that link, it will take you to the index of the book, and it'll also, there at the very top of the index, you'll see an excerpt of the book, which is like a paragraph. And so,
okay, here.
Okay, so
anyway,
there. We could have a whole show on what's in that book, but that is, I guess, what we're here for anyway. So,
right.
I guess the first question is, do you want to know about the excerpt, or do you want to know about the title or the book as a whole? You know, I can go in like two different directions just from your question.
The book as a whole.
Okay.
The book as a whole.
Sasha wants you to go. Go where Sasha wants you to go.
The main points. The Reader's Digest version. The main points.
Okay. So anyway, the book goes over how basically how attaching spirits cause each of these things. So, what you have to do is think about how you can prove in some fashion that the attaching spirits cause war, cause terrorism, cause suicide, and all the other different things that they cause. You just have to ask that question with each point in the title, and then that kind of gives you a different piece. So have you guys ever seen the show? It's called Dead Files. Have you ever seen that show?
What's it called?
Dead Files?
No, boy, we're missing out on a lot of this stuff. But
okay, so
they cause marital discord. You said. How do demons cause marital discord?
Well, once I had my wife in trance. I was talking to her while I had her in trance, and I was talking to this voice, and I asked the voice. Intuitively, I thought it was really strange in that moment who I was talking to. My intuition was kicking in, and I said to the voice that was coming out of my wife, I said, "Are you the conscious mind?" It said no. I said, "Are you the subconscious mind?" It said no. I said, "Are you the higher self?" It said no. I said, "Who are you?" It didn't answer. I said, "How many of there are you?" It said, "We are legion." You understand what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. So.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Endless.
All right.
Endless numbers. Yes.
Yes.
So what did you do when you had this happen to your dear wife?
Well, that was something I forgot about long ago. Okay. So I didn't really make any progress or effort towards doing anything about it at the time. I just let it go because I didn't really snap. I mean, I understood what I was talking to, but I don't typically do exorcisms. It's not something I do all the time. And I guess I don't even remember how that session ended. I couldn't really tell you exactly what I did at that moment. But I can tell you that many years later, I was sitting in the same chair I'm sitting in now, and or a similar one, and a rocker recliner. I was sitting in front of my computer like I am now, and I was in the living room, and I looked over at my wife, and she was she has this red mug that's fairly large, and she fills it full of wine and ice, and she likes to drink wine. So the first thing I noticed about her was she picked up the glass and took a drink, and she set the mug down, and then she picked it up and took another drink, and she sat it down. She picked it up and took another drink and sat it down, and it was only sitting there for like not even a full second. She kept doing this over and over. I've never seen her do that before or since, and so I knew something was strange was happening because the way she was drinking at the moment. And then I looked over at her face, and her eyes turned black, completely black. And then they turned red, completely red. And then her eyes rolled up into the top of her head. They turned completely white. And that pattern repeated itself, black, red, white, black, red, white. And that happened over and over. And then she stood up and turned to the right, and she started to take a step, and she never took that step. And she stood there, and I looked at her, and I kept waiting for her to take that step. I let her stand there for like 10, 15, 20 minutes. She could have been standing there for 30 minutes for all I know. I don't remember how long it was, but I let her stand there for a very long time, and she never took a step. She was totally frozen, as if somebody shot her with a freeze ray. And so at some point, without much thought, I got up, I grabbed her by the wrists, and I led her into the bedroom and threw her on the bed. And I stood beside the bed and held her wrists while she thrashed around, freaking out, thinking I was going to kill her. And of course, I'm a very highly trained martial artist. Chuck Norris's best friend trained me. If I wanted to kill somebody, I could kill them in less than a quarter of a second. It wouldn't take me. I wouldn't take him into a bedroom and kill him. I would have just killed her right there. You know, she would be dead. She's not dead. So we're still married. So anyway, at some point I realized that I couldn't control her standing beside the bed, holding her wrist. And so I got up on the bed and I sat on her waist, facing her. And I just kept holding her wrist. And at certain point, she would calm down. And so when she calmed down, I would let go of her arms, and she would try to take my head off. Hit me as hard as she could. And she hit me like literally right next to my eye. I mean, like not even, a millimeter away from my eye, and almost took my eye out. And so I grabbed her wrists again and held her, and I just held her hard enough. And she moved around with such power that it caused bruises up and down her arms. And I wasn't doing anything to her arms. I was just using just enough force to keep her from getting free. And at some point, what happened was her eyes rolled up in the top of her head, and she fell back, and she stopped breathing. And so I got off of her, and I moved down towards the end of the bed, and I was watching her, and she was stiff as a board. There was no chest movement. There was no stomach movement. She was like, she looked dead to me. I thought she was dead. And so I thought she had died. I mean, I literally thought she had died. I was very upset. And I guess I skipped a point. There was there was a moment when I have to go back a few minutes because this is important to the story. There was a point where I was sitting on her waist, and I got tired of listening to her scream. She was screaming at the top of her lungs for like 2 hours. And if you put a gun to my head and told me to scream as loud as I could, I swear I couldn't scream for more than a minute or two, 5 minutes at the most. She was screaming for like 2 hours, right? And so at some point, I got tired of listening to her scream. It was just annoying me really bad. And so I took my hand and I stuck it over her mouth very lightly. I wasn't pressing down, and I was very careful not to cover her nose. And so I'm surprised she didn't bite me. And so my hand, oddly enough, I guess I'm trying to think of whether it was my right hand or my left hand. But anyway, as it was covering her mouth, a couple of my fingers were spread apart, and I could see the blood coming off of her lip, her upper lip. This cut formed across. She still got a remnant of this cut. It formed, and it's like maybe an inch long, or maybe half an inch long, and I could see the blood spattering out from underneath my fingers as the cut was forming.
Oh, no, we ran out of time. We'll have to do more another time. Sorry about for hanging on the story. Much love and blessings. Aloha.
Thank you so much.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we are listener-sponsored and commercial-free. But there still are bills to pay. In order to raise some needed funds to cover the cost, our station is offering a silver special. In the continental United States for a $60 donation, or in Alaska, Hawaii, or Canada for a $70 donation, we will send you an uncirculated 2018 1-ounce pure silver Eagle. The $70 donation, the extra 10 is to cover shipping, by the way, outside of the continental United States. When making the donation, you must put Silver Eagle promo in the notes on the donation. And thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at revolution.radio and freedomslips.com. Without you, there is no us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.